senior team, whether you like it or not. That is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of this game.
no.
Let's go to the last part.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
WESN.
Hello Trinidad and Tobago, my name is Mark Anthony Peter and welcome to Breakthrough, airing live this wonderful Monday morning right here on WESN Content Capital. I am joined at the Breakthrough table by my co-host, as per usual, Sean Michael Small. Hello Sean, how are you?
I'm sleepy.
Well, rest is important.
But I do believe that I am doing much better than the people that went to that concert on Saturday.
Oh no, yes. So I mean, folks should know by now what sort of happened. There was supposed to be there was a concert, but a couple of the artists, one of the most notable artists, Vice Cartel, he sort of pulled out.
Wasn't it more or less the entire international lineup
that pulled out?
Yeah.
I just know of two. I know of him and then I know of another artist that pulled out shortly after. But proper explanations and all of those things. We move on. But I know a lot of people were disappointed. In fact, this is going to be hilarious. In Mass on Sunday, my priest brought it up. He's like, I know a lot of people were disappointed. Yesterday, and somebody in the back said, yes, we were. I love my church. It's so hilarious. But it goes to the fact that these things affect people. I think it's not one type of person that is going to these things. It's not one type of person that enjoys these things. So some people will be disappointed, and it's quite fine. It's not quite fine to be disappointed, but these are the things at hand.
Well, I mean, it made news, multiple news stories, right? One of the things now is there's a news report that they're looking out, they're looking to maybe look to have refunds. I don't know how that works per se, because part of the problem is well, you do the show. Like, I guess, look, you could maybe justify, look, we won't fully refund you, right? But this is a promoter's nightmare. Right? Like, even for a business to do a refund, it's not that simple. But now potentially to try to process, to put you, it's going to cost you money to set up something. If you're going to do it, even if it's a partial refund, it's still like a loss, right?
For sure.
So I guess at this point, the most they could hope for is to break even. But this has even reached cabinet where the Minister of Finance is like, I'm going to look into the foreign exchange situation over this.
Because on that note, I know once the refund was made to Vibes Cartel, everybody was like, that's a lot of U.S. money. That's a lot of money, and what's going on with our foreign exchange, etc., etc., etc. But aside from that, this goes into what we have to do as artists and as an art industry, how we manage risk and how we manage crisis.
Well, and I would say it's not even so much with the artists. This goes now to the promoters, to the producers, to the investors, right? Because I wonder to what extent do we operate a little too much, or at least some of us, right?
So laissez-faire,
laissez-faire, and you know, well, oh God, don't worry about it. You know, you can try. Like, listen, at the end of the day, you obviously did not pitch marbles with the international acts back in the day,
right?
Right. So it's not the same thing, and we already have a situation where sometimes the government, our very own government, acts like this, but we kind of maybe don't always understand. Yeah, but international acts, they don't need to wait on us. They don't need our business, right? We are a small player in their market, right? For our players, for our local artists, yes, anybody of a certain size, that's going to be a big deal. You know, you're not gonna want to annoy them or get on their bad side. So you can maybe mistreat them, and I'm sure it happens away as well, right? I'm sure behind the music of whatever artist, and it was in some situation and similar things happen.
Sure.
But if we want to step our game up, you know, yes, artists also need to be more professional, but I do wonder, this is a thing where it was in the press in advance.
Right.
And they didn't necessarily give out details, but I think the artist was saying, look, I have a problem, right? And then eventually, when they said things like miss multiple deadlines, it's like, well,
So that goes into legal contractual obligations and making sure that those things are fulfilled. So that comes back to sort of your work and professionalism of dealing with that.
So in this sense, the risk management, but the artist was there. Now the question is, at least that's what it looks like.
Right.
Was the risk management by the producer?
Yeah, because I don't think the festival has put out any sort of formal statement sort of outlining what happened. But it comes down, I have two questions for you. So the first one is, do you think it's easier? I have my own opinions because I know what an artist requires, because I do producing things, I do directing things.
Yeah.
So I'm taking into consideration the artist in mind, because this is how I would like to be treated. I've been on the other end of being hired or being asked to be part of a project. So in terms of, so when I'm doing a project, I try as best as possible to take the artist in mind. Do you think that there's a gap between how people sort of, not relate to the artist, but connect to the artists, keep them in mind when they're producing these things, when they're promoting these things? Is there a gap there? Are they operating just as a promoter, a marketer, rather than seriously keeping all persons involved in mind?
You see, I think it comes back to how mature is the industry.
Okay.
Right? Because the parts that I've been a part of with you, it's not a professional part of the industry.
Right.
So a lot of it is based on relationships and favors and the interpersonal relationships that are pre-existing that allows for a lot of informal communication. Right? But you can't treat every situation like that. But then what happens now is, if you want to insist on being too professional, people might take that the wrong way. Why you getting on so far, right? It's not that serious, except when you're spending 1.3 plus million US dollars on a foreign act. Now you have to be more professional. But the question is, does the experience of the various players in the industry know how to do that? Because I remember in our previous organization, the Love Movement, we were part of a performance. An international group was brought in to perform at Napa. And it seemed as though the organizer didn't fully understand what it meant to put on that type of performance.
That level of scale, yeah.
In Napa.
Right.
Because Napa was not, at the time at least, outfitted as properly as Queen's Hall was.
Right.
Napa was still relatively new. So here comes an international act where they are well already accustomed with digital soundboards where they just put in their presets and done, right? No, it's all analog. So you had one of the members up in the booth trying to fiddle with the soundboard to do the rehearsal, right? And it's analog, so you need like constant adjustment. I don't even know who the sound guy was, to be honest, right? For the performance. So on one hand, on our level, these kinds of things are kind of fine. But once you scale it up, and we're not talking scale in numbers of the audience, but we're definitely talking
level
scale in the fact that, and the level of expectation. Because the local audience are thinking, oh, we have an international act, we expect the world, right? But what happens if the supporting infrastructure isn't up to snuff, right? And it's not so much the event producer's fault per se, but there's a lot of things where not every sound engineer has experience in different types of concerts. Not every event promoter has experience with different types of events. So then when you get certain technical issues where if you weren't in the arts, musical arts sphere, would you have known beforehand that Napa was equipped with analog boards out to the gate? Probably not. Which is, Queen's Hall upgraded a while ago at that point, right? And Queen's Hall was purposely designed in a certain way to not have some of the technical issues that Napa has, right? So you're not going to think Napa, the newest, greatest, and latest thing, is going to have these deficiencies.
So it goes to a conversation. It goes to a topic of sort of trying your best to work into the space that you're in, but also but on the point that you're making, being equipped, knowing what is going to be required for the acts that you have and for the level of performances that you have.
Yeah.
I was talking to one of my friends yesterday, actually. We had a gig yesterday, and we did it in a church, and the church is well built for those sort of natural acoustics, so we did not require amplification, so it was quite fine. We just sang in the church without any mics, but we didn't sing like. I had to tell my friend, like, even though there is technique for songs pre-amplification, as in pre-mic, like early classical or any sort of thing like that, and before mics were invented, and then after mics and all of those things were invented, right? So there's a technical approach to it. So
because certain pop singing couldn't happen in a concert hall without mics.
Exactly. But here's the thing. It was sort of more contemporary sort of gospel repertoire that we were doing.
Right.
So I told my friend, like, sometimes in certain scenarios, yes, you do have the option to consider your technical approach based off of what the style of the music is, and also based off of the space. And in a situation like yesterday, we really had to take into consideration the space, not so much more than the style of music, because it's like, do I serve the style of the music, or do I serve the music and make sure that I'm heard? Right. So coming back to your point, do we do these grand scales because I want to do this and let's just invite these people, or is it a matter of being realistic with what the expectations are, what is required, and then fulfilling it?
Think about all the carnival fetes that are not on time. How many Soca Monarchs was not done on time and what did not seem to have been run totally professionally?
That is a big issue.
Right? And that is the one of, if not the main pillar of our professional music industry, our commercial music industry, right? We do have a national orchestra, we do have certain other professionals in music fields, but the core of our commercial local music industry is soca. And how many of those events have issues? In part because do the organizers really understand, and to some extent do the performers understand. So there are times when, and I think when Fayan was running it, I would imagine she insisted and had to insist on a tighter ship. Right? Now, I am fairly certain to some extent how much deference is given to someone like Marshall Montano or Kess on various fetes, because they have large fees, right? Not as large as Vibes Cartel, but I mean, we ain't talking outside the ballpark, right? We ain't talking, it might be 1-0 less, but it's still getting up there, right?
Actually, he might be more than
that. He might be more, right? There you go, right?
More than that.
Especially depending, right? So, but my point is, we're not talking there.
So the point
they're still up there 6 figures.
Of course.
Right?
So the point is, yes, you kind of have to run a tighter ship. Yes, there is, when it comes to, because you're putting out this amount of money for them.
But my point is, like, are they leading the way with professionalism? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not entirely sure, right? And even if they are, is that enough? Because again, what did I say? Not every sound engineer knows how to deal with certain performances,
things,
right?
right?
So that translates into when it's outside of their comfort zone, right? And the comfort zone includes a certain amount of laissez-faire attitude, and if we're not on time, we're not on time. Look, even this concert did not start on time, right? They didn't, because there's a DJ and vendors, they didn't even open the gates on time, right? Now, even, I think, as generally speaking, I expect that he's a professional. I kind of know him a little bit, right? Acquainted, I guess is the best way to put it, right? But when he did his Kes Tuesdays in the Oval, I think for the first time, somebody dropped the ball because they didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know outside of what they were accustomed to. And they only had one entrance. And it was not enough for the crowd. Luckily, we went earlier, so we weren't in the excessively long line, right? But I mean, I understood, I kind of realized, wait, this is the only entrance for everybody? That don't make sense to me.
But yes, because sometimes, especially when there are these sort of free state events that happens in the Savannah or in the North Stand.
Right.
Yeah. And some of these things tend to be free because it's the state is putting it on, etc. But it seems like they don't take into, like, it always seems like
it's not professional.
There's a story, I think there was a time where there were more tickets printed than actual available seats.
Yes, I think that was last year, not this year, past.
I think
the
so,
one before.
And that was a big issue. Like you're printing this amount of tickets. Obviously, each ticket corresponds to a person in a seat, that sort of thing. You don't want people to sort of stand up.
And now, it's not that these things don't happen abroad. They happen abroad.
They do.
But I think part of it is the response, because it seems as though, yeah, we kind of learn from it, but there doesn't seem to be any kind of push to improve.
So this is going to be my next point. How important is the response after the crisis? Because yes, you may not have been prepared for said crisis, but how do you then manage it?
So
moving forward?
One of these oversimplifications is business school is mostly telling people about the mistakes of people that were in business before.
Right.
And you turn that into theories, right? Some of it will be based on social theory and economic theory and stuff like that, right? But a lot of business school is kind of what are good HR practices? Well, it's because we saw these things fall apart in HR. It's because this is what worked in marketing and so on and so on. And a lot of professional concert people that manage tours for acts abroad, well, to some extent, somebody learns by making mistakes.
Yes.
Right? So there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. The problem is, why does it feel as though our industry...
We're not learning.
Yeah, we might not make
the same mistake,
but we'll make mistakes of a similar level, and the outcome will be of the similar level.
The overall lesson was not learned in terms of being sure. So there was a blog post posted by Melissa Jimenez. She's a great sort of artist manager. She does a lot of things in art administration. She also does a lot of work with ICNTT. She's the general manager, and she sort of put out a blog post, and I encourage everyone to read it. Just sort of search it up. She outlines a lot of things, sort of the ripple effects of these sorts of things. And the last one really spoke to me. It sort of perpetuates an industry stereotypes. Last-minute cancellations reinforce harmful narratives about, quote-unquote, Caribbean unreliability, making it harder for legitimate regional artists to secure global bookings or fair advances. Now,
or to get other foreign acts to come in.
Well, right. So that's the thing. So even though, and she says last-minute cancellation, obviously she sort of prefaced, like, we don't know. It's not like there was a result and there was a cause and effect. So it's not like anybody just sort of pulled out just for pulling out's sake, right?
Yeah.
But it's the perception of the last-minute cancellation that is going to reinforce this perception that, Caribbean people, we're never on time, we don't start on time, we're sort of unreliable, we don't sort of stick to our word and stuff like that. And I think that's like a huge, huge issue that we have.
Because part of it is the reputation. When you have a negative reputation, I say this all the time about the police and government on Talking Point, You have to work extra hard to get, think of when a celebrity has bad PR. Yes, sometimes there's no such thing as bad PR, but just look at the Will Smith slap, right? It technically derailed his career at the height of his career.
And at the Oscars.
Right, so to some extent, you could say, oh, well, he wasn't really harmed. Well, no, after winning the Oscar, he's supposed to now command 20 million a movie or more, and he's supposed to be like this generation's current movie star, right? We're talking right after Tom Cruise, maybe Denzel, right? And especially since we're kind of devoid of that from the generations after him, rest in peace Chadwick Boseman, right? It was his moment, right, to help the industry that probably needs people of his caliber. And any other day except that day, I would say he would have been a great example of a talented performer, but also a good person, except what happened is what happened. So now what did it do? It derailed his career, right? And to some extent, the industry will suffer a little bit for it. He's banned from the Oscars for 10 years, right? And now he has to rehabilitate that, so it's going to take time. And if you don't put the work in, and you need to understand, it's not going to be like, well, I say sorry and then it's fine.
You know what I think what I think is the most difficult thing, at least I would say personally for me, sort of balancing the business side of things, knowing when to be business-minded and knowing when to be just plain old human.
Well,
and that kind of, that sort of, especially for someone like me who's very into personal connection and making sure and not just fitting everyone's needs, but sort of trying to make sure that you look out for everybody. It becomes kind of difficult. Like, so then where does the business end and the human begin and vice versa?
Because the problem is, art at that level is still to some extent based on relationships. Quentin Tarantino, he has relationships with people.
Level?
Right? Professional, high-end, international, right?
For sure, yes, it's still based on
Sam Jackson,
relationships
right?
and networking and stuff like that.
He wanted Michael Marsden for a role, he couldn't get him. He had to take John Travolta, Pulp Fiction, ended up being a big movie, right? Christopher Nolan has his people. A lot of directors have their people, right? That they like to work with, because they know, and when you're trying to collaborate with someone, do you want to, yes, collaborating with someone new might be exciting, but it could blow up in your face. Whereas the people who you've collaborated before, you could not just trust, but now there's the excitement of how much further could we go?
Yes, because
what's the next thing we could do?
We've built into a professional relationship.
Because we've gotten to X, now we could go to Y. We did A, now we could do B. If I go with someone new, it might be something different, but I'm still at step one, right? And then again, not every personal interaction, and art and collaboration is to some extent based on trust, based on personal relationships. And one of the things though is that I guess at the end of the day, you could still be professional with those personal relationships, and it all depends on how, because there are a lot of horror stories where, you know, the artists at the end of the day, they felt that they were betrayed by management, betrayed by a producer, betrayed by the studio, betrayed by the recording company.
Exactly, because here I am on a stage or behind a canvas or on behind a mic or whatever, pouring my heart and soul out in terms of my art. This is what I'm doing, and here you are sort of mismanaging. I'm trusting you with my business because I need to focus on my art.
We think of music entertainment, of scantily clad entertainers as the norm. But here's an example. In K-pop, that's not always the norm. Some of the costumes that Lady Gaga and Sabrina Carpenter wears, when a K-pop artist wears them, even if there's leggings and stuff, it's like, no, that's too short, it's panties. It's like, I've seen worse, you know, but still, they don't want to deal with it. There was one female group that wasn't that popular, right? So the management literally forced them, and I'm talking physically, like, locked them up, took away their phones, did all kind of unhanded things to get them to wear more revealing clothes. What happened in the end was the public saw they did it, so the public backlash was directed at them.
Of course.
And then the type of fan base changed to be people more willing to engage with that, eye candy, and not necessarily lewd behavior, but more like revealing, right? And they had to deal with the consequences of a management decision. And things like that, I wouldn't say happen all the time, but what happens when there are certain movies that fail because of studio interference? The initial criticism goes to the director. The initial criticism goes to the production team, and if an album fails, the initial criticism goes to the artist, not to the recording company.
Yeah.
Right? It's only depending on contractual obligations, then eventually the artist might say, well, those songs are not what I wanted for my album, or those edits or those arrangements are not what I wanted.
Well, that's an interesting thing.
A case in point, 50 Cent said he did his album and the studio wanted, the recording company wanted this next 50 Cent album to build on his momentum. And he pushed his group's album second, not his own. He essentially, potentially gave up money to defy the studio to push his group's album because that's what he wanted to do. Right?
So it's interesting that you pointed out, you said when the film goes bad or the movie goes bad, the directors, the face.
Yeah, like Justice League is one example. Zack Snyder got thrown on the bus.
Yeah, boy.
Right?
Sure,
but then when you look at not every choice he made in his cut was better than Josh Whedon's cut.
For sure.
But mostly it was.
Right. So then it comes, there's also this ripple effect on how, on public perception, but also those who work in influencing public perception in terms of the media and things like that, or the influencers, the bloggers and stuff like that. It's very important because, as you mentioned, the girl group who went out in the revealing clothing, the first thing that people are going to see is them.
Yeah.
Right? So we also kind of have to be very careful. When I say me, I just mean people working in media and stuff like that. Also need to be very careful with how the story is told and make sure it's
I mean, did Vybz Kartel speak unprofessionally at any point in time? I don't think so.
No, he handled it because probably just being a customer, just having this sort of professional standing in the industry, having this much experience and being in it for so long, he knew how to sort of handle himself. But the thing is, not every artist can, right? So then it comes down to your PR and your management and stuff like that for how you respond. But in terms of like, even with that example with the festival, I don't think we've heard anything from you.
Yes, management sometimes an artist could overplay their hand.
Right.
Right? But I think in this case, in this example, it was a situation where, look, if he performs, he loses all his leverage.
Right.
And then people might say, well, so what? He owes us. Technically, no, he does not. Because if he performs and he gets stabbed in the back, he gets underpaid, they promised him things and they never deliver. He sets himself up. Yeah. Not just that, if that could be done once, then it could be done twice.
Again.
You have to, at some point, draw a line in the sand and say, this is my boundary, my professional boundary, and I will not cross it.
Right.
And the thing is, your values, and I've said this before on other shows, are what you're willing to sacrifice money for. So I would imagine, as long as he doesn't keep the money,
right,
depending on what's the contract, if the contract says, right, but he canceled, so as long as he doesn't keep the money, he's well within his right, right, to say, I'm not performing because this is not what we agreed to.
Yes, because he has to consider his core values as well. In sort of this topic, I was doing a little bit of research on this international art consulting firm, and they say when you sort of the steps, they're sort of outlining the steps of managing a crisis. And step number 2 is identify organizational values and limits.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So some of the things, so they said an organization's mission statement, vision statement, and organizational values are never more crucial than in a time of crisis. And then they said, well, some of those things, will artists be paid in full if events, exhibitions get cancelled? Will staff members need to be followed or laid off if artists take, all of these things that you have to take into consideration. You have to almost go back to the source, go back to the root of why this organization exists, how it exists, and how it's meant to operate, and that will inform how you manage the crisis.
Because you have a crisis, your value will inform you how to deal with it. Because if your value is, you want to basically saying professional attitude, professional execution, well then at some point, even if it costs more, you have to figure out a way to get the cash and not reach the point where you're breaking, allegedly, multiple deadlines, right? And potentially then, if your values are, this is the hard line that we can't cross, right? And we're willing to sacrifice money for.
And if it's crossed, we
have to bite the bullet, right?
Of course.
So what that does is you have an internal incentive to not let it get that far, to do everything you can to not let it get that far. Now, I don't know if maybe they literally were going week to week getting US and they literally were a few weeks too short, right?
All right.
But that would be a little crazy to me if that's how you want to, again, right?
Yeah.
Because where's the risk assessment in that?
Of course, that's a big risk.
What is the plan if it isn't pulled through? Because reportedly they tried to offer him property in Trinidad. At the end of the day, that's not US.
Yeah.
right? And that's not what was agreed to. So I think, you know, at times we fall into the mistake of that other people do as well, not just us. Throw money at the problem to try to band-aid the poor organization. So in this case, how much was it poor organization? Because it's not like Indian Arrival Day was some secret that the Hindu community only announced like the election a month before, right? Yeah. Okay. So my point is they would have had lead time. They should have known Friday the banks would be closed. Ooh. Right? So I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not saying that it's their fault.
Bank. What happened?
But I mean, they should have known the banks was closed. Because I saw somewhere where they're like, well, you know, we had difficulty getting foreign exchange on Friday because the banks closed. It's like, yes, I don't know, maybe if you have a calendar.
Even like the calendars on your phone, it comes with these things.
There
like
you go.
know.
There you go.
Like,
So
if Google Calendar knows Indian Rifle Day, why don't you?
Americans know about our Indian Rifle Day.
I know we have to wrap up really soon, but one of the points that the article that I was mentioning, you're so stupid. One of the articles mentioned.
I'm not wrong, though, am I? No. I mean, you know, I didn't realize that someone put Indian Arrival Day in a ninja stealth suit, right? And jumped out of a birthday cake saying, surprise, all of a sudden on Thursday.
I know, right? But to that point, one of the things that they listed, communicate often and communicate clearly, right? I remember I had a couple instances, but one particular instance comes to mind in organizing an event that I was doing. I would send one of the vendors, not one of the vendors, I would send one of the people that I'm working with, one of the organizations that I was working with, an email sort of outlining certain things. And if I sent 10 emails in the span of organizing that, 7 out of those 10 emails were they responded via phone call.
Right.
And then I learned that, and that was only, I started realizing that, like, coming down closer to the event, I was like, why are they only calling me? I'm not getting proper things in writing, because then I started realizing, oh, the thing that you said at the last phone call does not match the thing you just said just now.
Yeah.
So that comes down, again, that communication, and that's something we're also guilty of in terms of sort of our laissez-faire.
I was going somewhere else, right? When you try to mama-guide someone, you don't want to give them weekly, daily updates. You want to avoid conversation as much as possible because you could only BS so much on one issue, right? So one of the things is, and let me spin it in a different way, if you need to avoid a conversation because you're stringing someone along, maybe you should not be operating that way to begin with. Maybe you should realize the fact that I am not comfortable talking to this person means I'm doing something wrong and I should change what I'm doing. Because if I'm not able, right, to give updates, if I don't like to give updates, if I don't like that every time I give updates, the person on the other end of the line is not going to like it, maybe I need to do better with my execution so that it won't be all negative.
If I don't like putting things in writing, so that we can respond in writing.
So I am just going, because there's two levels to this. There's the ones who don't mean bad, but they end up in a bad situation.
Right, for sure.
That's where I'm mostly going. But you're touching on the ones that are outright malicious, and at the end of the day, part of it is the industry needs to have standards and values. So for the people that don't fit into reasonable standards and values, on principles, I ain't talking about some special snowflake value.
Sure.
The industry needs to figure out a way to give them some consequences, not necessarily expel them, but...
And on the flip side, there was something in writing that mentioned my name and nobody communicated with me. But anyway, as we move forward, that's my last sort of thing. That's my last thing for this segment. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Trinidad and Tobago, we're going to be right back with our guests. Stay tuned. Here's more Breakthrough. Don't go anywhere.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
Hi, I'm Claudette, radiographer at the radiology departments at the community hospital. We offer high-quality service with state-of-the-art equipment in X-ray, ultrasound, CT, and mammogram. Come, our friendly staff awaits you.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Now you don't need to register nothing. You don't need. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God. So we kind of at a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim, or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands, and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.
And welcome back to Tobago to Breakthrough. Still joined by my co-host, Mr. Sean Michael Small, as always. Sorry. But we have an exciting guest for you all this morning. She actually was on the show back in season 1.
Season 1?
Yes, when we had the concert hall behind us.
It was so long ago?
Maybe this will jog your memory. Here's a quick clip of her on our last on the show. Take a look.
Okay.
You always start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. Everybody starts somewhere, right? But I think a major thing that a lot of us as performers kind of have to navigate at some point is learning when you've outgrown where you have started. Yes. And just learning how to let go and having the confidence within yourself to take that leap of faith and just go into something new or something bigger, you know, because if you stay within the confines of your comfort zone, you're never really going to get anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, all right, and that was singer, dancer, choreographer, performer, all of those things, Stephanie Carrington. Graduate of the UE Department of Creative and Festival Arts, and now she is adding producer to her portfolio of many things that she does. We are joined at the Breakthrough table by Stephanie Carrington. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming back. Clearly, you know, your behavior did not scare her off.
Why are you always looking at me?
Because it's always you. But anyway.
It's always me?
Yes.
I mean, one of these days, I'm going to take the hint, you know.
I'm sorry. But in that clip that we just saw, you were one of our guests in season 1, and you were sort of talking about expanding yourself beyond the comfort zone. And that's sort of what we have to do as artists in general. So what I'd like to ask you, you're here, you come to promote your show, which we'll get to in a bit, but now you're expanding yourself beyond the comfort zone, now you're stepping into a producer role, right? So how has that sort of been for you? How has that process been? Speaking of expanding yourself beyond comfort zone, how has that process been preparing for this sort of recital that's happening?
Right. So I've had experience doing both already. So being a performer and then also somewhat producing, but never in this big of a role. So I've had little glimpses of what this entails, which kind of already set me up or prepared me a bit for what it is that I'm doing. I am choreographer, as you said, right? So choreography for me, in my experience, has played a big part of the producer aspect, only because we as choreographers play a big part in the visual of the entire concert. So I've been playing around with that for some time, which is nothing that I'm unfamiliar with. What has been the biggest new thing for me, though, is the spending hours on YouTube looking and listening for music that can go into the program and what works well together and how to build a story, song song to song to song.
So I have to ask this question because this always comes up, right? When you are when you are a cog in the wheel, right? You spend all the wonderful time complaining about the powers that be and what stupid decisions they make and why they made these decisions and all of that. Now that you are the one in charge, right, you have no one else to complain about. If there's anything that bothers you, it's your fault. What is that experience like?
Oh my gosh.
Well, ultimately, you know, the buck stops with you now.
Yeah.
What is that like? Because there's no safety net. There's no one else to kind of make those decisions. You have to make the decisions. And then there could be things when there were uncomfortable personal decisions between people with dissenting opinions. Now, you have to potentially kind of make sure that it's smoothed over and try to figure out how to manage people. What's that like?
It's a lot. I've been doing this a lot recently and just saying, cut it out. Just don't even bother, like, or replace this. Because I'm like, we're so near production time. I don't have time to worry about the things that are not happening. Right. So it's like, how best in the short space of time that we have, can we make it happen? For sure. And even something as small as like, I've been looking for a prop or something that can work as a set piece. And stage manager was just like, just make it, like, just do something simple. It doesn't have to be the actual thing itself, but a replica of. You know, and I'm like, okay, that could work, you know? But these are things that I haven't sat down and spent a lot of time to think about because I'm thinking about everything else.
But is there any risk that maybe some of these decisions might be hasty? Because I feel as though sometimes, like, the person in charge might make a decision and to the subgroup that's dealing with that directly, they're like, no, but it doesn't have to just, why did they make such a rash decision? We could have do this, we could do that, we could do the other. But the point is, once you're that busy, you don't have time necessarily to give it all the consideration, right? Have you potentially found yourself, you know, wondering, am I making too hasty of a decision with some of these things or not giving it enough attention, but you just might not have enough time, right?
I have found myself in positions like that. But I try as best as possible to discuss with my team a lot. So there are decisions that I would make for myself and I would say, you know, I want to go this route, but I would never finalize without discussing with the necessary people involved. So we all come together and make a mutual decision at the end of the day.
Okay, nice. So you do have a strong team sort of behind you in terms of producing this. Now let's just pull up the flyer. Let's let everybody know what event we are talking about. Herald, Voice of an Angel, featuring the one and only Stephanie Carrington, happening at Central Bank Auditorium this Sunday, the 8th of June at 6:30 p.m. Tickets are $150. And that's happening this Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. You can sort of come back to us. Now, in terms of
one question, it's not just you, right?
No.
It's not a one-on-one show. Because that'll be kind of crazy that you have a full team just to produce you alone.
Listen.
I mean, I know it can happen, but still.
Right. So what are you most, so as he mentioned, you know, there is a cast, right, happening for this concert. We just showed the flyer. Tickets are available. Get your tickets, guys, as it's going to be a wonderful show. What are you most looking forward to for this show?
Seeing everything come together. So as I said before, as a choreographer, the visual is the biggest thing for us. So even though we would have worked in rehearsals teaching the choreography, until you see that happen on the stage and everything with the lights to the band playing and the costumes, you don't really see the essence of your work. So I think that's what I like
with the crowd, because you know, they say no plans are eye contact with the enemy. No performance, you know, is necessarily going to just smoothly survive that first opening night jitters, where, you know, it's one thing to rehearse an empty hall for, you know, you could do that 6 weeks straight. But once you get an audience in front of you psychologically, that's a big different scenario. Like, how much are you anticipating that? Because this is not just Stephanie Carrington, the performer or the choreographer. Now this is it's your picture on the promo, right? Like the audience is going to be looking to you for this. They're not looking to Mark, right? They're looking to you for this one. Like, how does that feel now? Because you are putting your name out there at another level that you've never done before.
Yep. I'm trying my best not to think about it.
I think you said something.
Sean for the question.
No, we need to invite Sule for next week to have a session with Stephanie on air. Yeah, because Mark was in a similar situation, right, where he said the same thing. He had a whole on-air therapy session. It was great. But I mean, you're trying not to think about it, but to some extent.
Bring that up every chance you get.
Because it's funny. Now, but no, back to you. Like you're saying, you're trying not to let it get to you, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But to some extent, though, at the same time, you still need to approach the situation with a certain level of gravitas, right? I mean, this is the first one, you know? Hopefully not the last, right? Many more to come after this.
Most definitely not the last. But yes, how has that been feeling? Yes.
I've been telling friends that I've met in this process a lot of distant family members and a lot of family friends, because that's majority of the people who will be in the audience. So I'm like, people who know me since I was born, who I grew up not really knowing, I'm like, they have an expectation already. So I'm like, okay, I just have to give it my all. I mean, I knew that was what it was going to be anyway. So yeah, there's a lot on the line, but you know, we'll make it happen and it will be amazing.
Right, so that I know it's going to be amazing, but the process has also been sort of amazing for you. What are some of the biggest things you've learned, some of your biggest lessons in this preparation? I mean, you said you've produced slightly, but this is sort of the big thing. This is the first thing on this sort of scale. What are some of the things that you've learned throughout this process?
To memorize all of my solos before bringing in a whole choir.
Right, okay. No, people might underestimate it, but to me, it makes sense. You have so much things on your plate, it's very easy for your own performances to slip through the cracks because you're probably, tell me I'm wrong, you're probably putting a lot more attention at times with everyone else. Because when everyone's together, that's when you have a time to address their performances, and you're like, well, I'll just handle me on my own, but you're kind of doing a disservice to yourself.
So I gave my assistant music director, who's sitting right next to me, a cutoff period for working with the choir specifically, because I said I need to get my mind in a frame to now be a performer as well. So I'm no longer producer. It's now time for everybody to produce what is going to be on the stage.
So here's a question for both of you all with regards to delegation. Because local organization, well, I mean, we can't help it, right? Like, not just music and performance arts, but like in a lot of things, when someone has a project, delegation is usually one of those things where it's like diversification for the government. They say it, but do they actually do it, right? Partially because you don't know how. Like, for a lot of people, it's easier psychologically to control everything yourself, to do it yourself. But in your case, how has that process been? Because part of it is you're relying on pre-existing relationships, so that's a plus, but you're also in charge. So how important, how useful, how much have you been able to utilize delegating to other people to try to get a real team, you know, and how has that process been, you know, because the roles at the very least are reversed now. Mark is assistant to you, you're not assisting him in anything, in his projects.
Right.
Oh. What I would say, if I can, I think with artists, in the artist sphere, like I've became friends with people that I've worked with before, right? So we met in a previous organization, so we were accustomed working. I had a role, she also had a role in terms of organizing things. So that professional sort of relationship was already set up from the get-go. So it's not like so it's an easy transition because throughout the process, throughout the relationship, whether it be personal or professional, we've also learned how to communicate. We've learned each other's boundaries and things of that nature. So we know it's somewhat easy. I'm going to say, because at least for me, I like, she knows to say things directly. Can you make this decision?
Right.
But she also knows but I also know when she asks, what do you think of this? It's not me making the decision. She's just sort of gathering information.
Right, so you know how to differentiate.
Exactly.
You have the shorthand already.
For sure.
Because to redirect for you, to more specifically, how much of a help do you think it's been? Mark has done his own shows before, and you have the pre-existing relationship. So not only is it easy to communicate, but it's not as though both of you all are the blind leading the blind, right? He has done this before. No, but I mean, it's not like neither of you all have experience doing your own show. So at the very least now, to someone with that experience as an assistant, usually that's not the norm because egos get in the way. Fortunately, it's not the case with Mark. Like, how much of a big deal was that to have him to lean on?
A big deal. A big, big deal. Mark is literally my right and left hand. I'm just whatever's left in the middle. Like, I give every thought that I have, I pass it by Mark. It does not, nothing happens without passing it by Mark. And that's just kind of the relationship, as he said, that we built over the last couple of years as friends. And so working together, it is easy. The only challenge that I have faced, so to speak, through the process of preparing for my concerts is that he is so busy and, and he has so many other things to do. So it's like, I just kind of have to wait my time.
Wow. You need to get in line. See, outside Mark's door, there's a line, current projects, right? And there's like a line of people. Just like, you know, so
it's
now,
not that bad. Let me say, it's not that bad. He will make the time.
So some BTS, so what you need like Luke or Eric there, like on a desk and be like, okay, Stephanie, you have your 5 minutes, right? 3:05 to 3:10, and then, okay, you get your 3:10 to 3:15.
Don't appreciate this from you at all. Oh my
all right,
God.
we're running out of time, but we have more stuff to show.
Yes, we do have some more stuff to show. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's just pull up that flyer one more time so that the public can know what is happening. Stephanie Carrington, Herald, Voice of an Angel. That flyer looking real nice. Central Bank Auditorium, Sunday the 8th of June, 2025. This Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Tickets are only $150. Come back to me, please. You see these affordable concerts that we are putting on. Listen, the talent is great. The price, but I'm right. Somebody just yelled in my ear on camera. Thank you very much. You don't do that to somebody like me, okay? But anyway,
because it's funny.
The point that I'm making is the talent is amazing, and it's going to be a phenomenal, phenomenal show. And as we go out, here's a little bit of a sneak peek of what you can expect from the Stephanie Carrington. My name is Mark Anthony Peter, Sean Michael Small. Have a good day, have a good week. See you all on Sunday. Here is Stephanie Carrington performing Once Upon a Dream.
When this all began, I knew there'd be a price. Once upon a dream. Once upon a dream.
WESN.
Here is your WESN News on the hour. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Tobago police officers home targeted after fatal shooting. Authorities warn of an above-average hurricane season. Man critical